welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast. It's the day after the Portuguese Grand Prix with myself, Nigel Chew, and I'm joined by two people. Yes, two people. There's no introduction this week. I can't really think of one. I'm joined by Adam Dickinson and Freddie Coates. How are you both doing after the race?
Tired. Well, it's the morning after. The morning after. Tired, sleep deprived. Got a lot of work on, busy. But yeah, I considered having my first ever coffee this morning, but in the end I decided I'd keep that particular powder dry for another big event in my life when I'm tired.
Powder.
It's the morning after the race before, and we're all here hungover from the craziness that wasn't Portimão. I don't know, I'm quite wide awake, but I'm disappointed, guys. I'm disappointed with the Line of Duty finale. And I think this needs top billing. Because 6 seasons since 2012 or 2011.
Hold on, Nigel, do you watch Line of Duty?
I don't watch Line of Duty. I know a bit.
All our listeners watch Line of Duty.
I thought that was interesting because I don't either.
I'm more of a Sherlock person, to be honest.
Yeah,
well, so you should appreciate it as well. 6 series has been building up, and then they go and give us that episode. What?
Oh. Let Freddie speak.
Let me speak. I'm having a rant. It'll finish quicker. It's like taking medicine. The quicker you do it, the quicker it's done. I'm your medicine. And it came to that, and it was okay. But will there be a season 7? Hit me up with your thoughts at FredCoast1999 on Twitter. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for that, Freddie. Speaking of 7, the 7-time world champion took the win. For the second time this year in 2021. It wasn't the best qualifying from Hamilton. In fact, he said it was one of his worst performances ever, yet he's still only 7 thousandths off Bottas. But he bounced back when it mattered. It's his 97th victory in Formula 1, 8-point lead over Verstappen in the championship. What do you think the key moments were in the race on his way to victory?
Well, I think one of the key moments could have been the safety car restart, which Bottas, I don't know, felt a bit weird. And he kind of screwed over Hamilton because Max got an absolute flyer. But that wasn't the key moment because Hamilton, initially it looked like Verstappen was going to challenge Bottas, and then Hamilton was able to come back and overtake Verstappen with it was just a really clinical move. Like, it was DRS, but it just looks so cold-blooded in the, in the way he just gave Verstappen no defense at all. And then again, he overtook Bottas with a nice sweeping move around the outside of turn 1. So I think those are the two key moments. I guess the start as well, in the fact that Mercedes were able to keep 1-2. It looked like Hamilton might be able to challenge Bottas, but in the end he wasn't. But yeah, I don't know. There weren't that many. I guess the key moment for Verstappen was being able to overtake Bottas and get into that second place and take another 3 points, or not lose another 3 points to the two Mercedes.
Adam's exactly right. Hamilton raced to victory and did it in the best way he could do. He got past very quickly on the other guys. First mistake from Verstappen, he capitalised, was able to tuck into the toe and get past. Managed to draw Bottas into some quite aggressive defence, which we've seen by other drivers at this track and famously at Suzuka. If you sort of stick to your line, you're more likely to stay ahead than if you defend. And Bottas was drawn into the defence through the fear of Hamilton. Hamilton got past. And then what was impressive for me later on was the fact that Hamilton was the guy for the tyres. Everyone was struggling with tyres all weekend. Hamilton was as well. But Hamilton was able to keep more consistent with her. I don't know if it's because he was in the lead or whatnot, but even though he was still absolutely pushing, he was wringing the neck of that car, but he was able to keep the gap and was able to do the job on the cold tyres as well when he came out the pits, because Verstappen closed 2.5 seconds on Hamilton's outlap because Verstappen had warmer tyres, but Hamilton was able to gather himself from that and just push on and on and on. And yeah, it would deserve 97th victory.
Yeah, I think last year his Portugal drive was very impressive too. He dropped down to 4th or 5th, then came through and overtook Bottas. I think this year was actually a little bit harder given he had to overtake Verstappen. And I think his 2 moves were very brave to go around the outside because they weren't completely done. He still had to do a bit more of the wheel-to-wheel stuff.
He went up the inside of Verstappen.
Yeah,
He did. Yeah,
he went. He got right up to the wall, and he and the way he then defended that going into because Verstappen came back at him going into turn 3, and the way he defended that and really sort of basically drove Verstappen almost into the gravel is just exactly what we're going to see from this fight between those two this year.
Take back from Imola.
Yeah, exactly. Because Verstappen's not going to hold back. Hamilton's not going to hold back with him either. If there's any chance to absolutely just walk him away, he's going to take it. And that's why he went around the outside for Bottas, because that's a kind of cleaner move. But he can do a more aggressive, much more aggressive move that will really impact Verstappen. On Verstappen, he's thinking about who he's racing. And he's doing that when he's still picking up on a mistake like that. The mistake was at turn 14 for Verstappen. By turn 1, Hamilton was already deciding how he's going to race this guy.
Yeah. Anything else to add on Hamilton's performance, Adam?
No, other than that, he got the win at a track where Mercedes clearly had the faster car, and that's important because there'll be, I think Imola and Bahrain, Verstappen and Hamilton kind of got wins on the others' hunting ground, really, in terms of where the cars looked strongest. But this win was just what was expected, I guess. He was very close to pole. It would have been nice for some circularity to see him get his 100th pole, where he broke Schumacher's record. But that didn't happen, but he came back. I think actually one thing I've just thought of is would you say he's got a slight weakness at starts or restarts? Because he's been, I kind of thought of it before the season, but then that's twice now in 3 races that Verstappen has taken him in that area.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. It's just circumstance, really. The wet start's a wet start. That's different. But Hamilton still got a much better start than Perez alongside there, and it was a mistake in the safety car restart because he was just checking his dash, or not his dash. He took one glance at Verstappen and Bottas had gone, and that obviously allowed Verstappen to get alongside him. Verstappen had to lift a bit because Verstappen's run was so good, so it was a mistake there. But I don't think it's an overall weakness. I think Hamilton's normally pretty bang on with starts, although Bottas got a fantastic launch at the grid yesterday. It was a brilliant start for Bottas, which is rare we say that.
I don't think Hamilton's any worse or better than, say, the average or the best starters, I'd say. So,
I think it's the way he comes back through the field is where Hamilton's fantastic if he has a bad start, I think.
Yeah, I think it kind of, what you said there, Nigel, I think that's kind of it. I think his starting ability is no worse than average, but I just that it's maybe not as big a strength as a lot of other areas of his racing. I don't really remember him ever being a lightning starter over his whole career, to be honest. It's not, as you said, Freddie, to me, that's not what I associate him with. But I think that'll just be one to watch through the season. I'll be interested to see.
But I don't think there's any driver who the start is the strength, really. Because, Bottas, yes, he's had some good starts, but he's also had some horrible ones. So I don't think that stands out.
When you're so high up the grid, the starts look less spectacular anyway. If you're far down the back, we had this with Stroll a few years ago where he was in the Williams way far back and he became pretty brilliant at positioning his car in quite lucky positions and just diving down. If Hamilton was in that position in a kind of a not great car at the back, maybe he could be fantastic just launching through, but he's got such a different attitude to these kind of things, and it's more about damage limitation if he has a bad start rather than going for banzai moves, because he's in a championship fight all the time, and if he's getting a start from second into first, that's fantastic. And if that's, say, in a midfield car from 14th to 11th, it would be considered brilliant. And it's that kind of thing. It's just the ability to show it at the top is different, I think. But you're right. It's not like the easiest thing to measure in Formula One drivers.
Just a point to pick on from what Adam said before. I think you mentioned Hamilton should have won, but I really do think Verstappen missed quite a few chances to win. I think he had the fastest time in Q3, not the fastest time in qualifying, but in Q3 when it mattered, only for the lap time to be deleted because of track limits. He then nailed the restart, got past Hamilton, and he made that mistake, which allowed Hamilton to get back past. And I think Verstappen, I won't say bottled it, but I think he made too many errors, and I think it was a pretty poor weekend for his high standards. I do think he missed a chance to win. I really do. Have you guys got any thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I think precisely you're right about the mistake he made to allow Hamilton through, which was really costly swaffer he got on in turn 14. And a similar kind of thing in turn 4 in qualifying basically denied him pole, like you say, because it was completely out of his control, but it was within the laws of track limits why it was deleted, and that's fair enough. He was, after the race, he was a bit disappointed, but he expected the Mercedes to win. Everything he was saying was a bit like, even if I did get into the lead, even if I did start on pole, Lewis would have got past Valtteri and got past me. And I don't know if he's telling himself that. I think he is a bit, but I think Verstappen could have been in the fight for a win a lot more than he's telling himself. And I think that's the right thing for him to tell himself. But
I think if he can tell himself that and believe it, that's arguably scarier, because that we know he's got a great mentality, but that's just another level. I think he did decent to get second, to be honest. I think that was probably the most likely position for him, and he made a good move on Bottas when Bottas was still coming out on cold tyres. So yeah, I don't think it was. I don't think kind of he'll look back on it as really a race loss, but I can see why you think that. Yeah,
it would have been bad if he'd finished third, but he finished second, and still there's only 2 drivers this year who's finished first and second, and that's Hamilton and Verstappen. So if he can carry that through, then that's as good as it can be for him at the moment.
In terms of driving, I'd say it's one of his worst performances since 2019.
Over the whole weekend or just the race?
The whole weekend, I'd say, yeah. Well, I really do. The result might not show that, but in terms of driving, I really think it was well below par. And I think he has missed a chance to win on perhaps a Mercedes circuit. And ultimately, you do have to have an almost perfect, if not a perfect weekend to beat Hamilton and Mercedes. And I can't help but feel, well, Verstappen could have won. I know you could say should have, could have, would have, but he could have won all 3 races, and he could have been on pole at all 3 races as well. But he hasn't. He's only had 1 each. And I think Portugal just kind of showcased that a bit more. I really do think it was a massive opportunity that he missed.
I think that's testament to why he was so at peace at the end of the weekend. He's really come to terms with this fight, and he's really, really come to terms with how hard this is going to be for him. And this is just, I think he's really sort of realised how much work he's going to have to put in. And I don't know if he's sort of forgiving himself for Hamilton being so good. And I think that's the wrong motion to go down if he is. But I think he's really realising that he's got to be absolutely top notch, as you say, to have any chance of carrying this championship through the year.
I think I saw kind of a headline that Rosberg had said Verstappen is finally realising how good Hamilton is, which I don't know, a lot of stuff gets taken out of context, but it does seem like that. But I think for him to win, I think a lot of things would have had to go right. I think it would have been,
well, that's what Nigel's saying, is like the things that went wrong, if they'd gone right, and the things that went wrong were in Verstappen's control. It wasn't like things out of his control went wrong. It's too much what if. It's too much what if for me, because the Red Bull was set up for qualifying. The Red Bull wasn't set up for the race. The Red Bull was set up with more wing than the Mercedes was. The Mercedes was designed to overtake and have a bit of that top line speed so they could defend, and that was the perfect thing for Mercedes. Red Bull didn't go down that route, and that's why Verstappen couldn't get past and could get past with Bottas and Hamilton respectively. So it's sort of, I think it's a lesson for Red Bull sort of in how they choose to approach these weekends, because they won championships by going for a qualifying setup rather than a race setup. So are they going to be carrying on with that kind of mindset, or are they going to be thinking, okay, we're so close, we've got to sort of attack this like a midfield team and focus on a racier setup rather than a sort of more perfection setup.
I think that's easier as well when it's only 2 cars. If there's a Ferrari mixed in there as well, and suddenly if you have a bad qualifying, you could be starting 6th versus here, 4th, probably 3rd or even 2nd. You can probably afford to make a mistake and still beat Bottas and Perez at certain circuits. So I don't know. I still think you can't take too much away from it.
For me, if he starts on pole position, he wins it, because with Bottas in 2nd,
I think Hamilton
will be 5 seconds behind or whatever, and can't win the call or whatever. And if he had the chance, like I said, when he overtook Hamilton. Once he overtook Hamilton, I thought he was favourite for the win, but then he made a crucial mistake at the wrong time. And I think this is the thing: he's making key errors at key moments. He did it in Bahrain as well when he went off the track, and he's done it 2 or 3 times this weekend. Even on the fastest lap thing, he went wide at turn 14 and lost that extra point. So for me, he's made 3 key errors at important times in the weekend.
It depends how
you can probably count 3 key errors for Hamilton, but they've not bit him in the same way.
They weren't crucial moments, though, I don't think. And I think that's the thing. It's those pressure, high intensity moments, and I think that Verstappen, that's where he's losing out at the moment, I'd say.
Is the key errors are different. With Hamilton, there weren't really any errors with sort of the positioning of the car, in terms of he didn't drop the car and lose the back end or anything. Or look, we saw Verstappen did a couple of times over the weekend at crucial points, as Nigel says, and it's a hard thing to say because they're very different cars. But it's looking in this weekend, it looked like the Rebel was the more sensitive car, which is a complete role reversal for the first race weekend, where the Mercedes was the topsy-turvy rear end instability car. But it was so heightened by the wind this weekend, and the track surface that has still not been rubbered in because it's just been winter, so everything's been washed off over the past 5 or 6 months anyway. They need another summer or 2 there to actually get some grip into that track. And Barcelona, I think, will be more key for that. I don't think this is a true pecking order this race because of the low grip conditions. So I think Barcelona Rebel will be much closer.
Yeah, I think it seems like he made the error at the restart today. He obviously made a big one at Imola, and he got that big oversteer at Bahrain when Verstappen was closing in just before he overtook him. But it's just not affected him in the same way. Be it because Verstappen's then made errors after that, I don't know. But yeah, I think, like you say, Freddie, it'll be interesting to see where we're at in Spain. But this is a championship that will punish errors. It's not. Yeah. Well, we saw last season Bottas would be half a second behind Hamilton and still be second by another half a second back to the next driver. It's not like that. There are these small errors that will be punished, and that's what we want from the sport.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about Bottas. Even though he got pole, it never really felt like he was going to win. Unfortunately, it just kind of felt like a matter of when he would be overtaken or out-strategized.
Outplayed.
Yeah, by the others.
Beaten.
So, I guess, I don't. It's difficult with Bottas. It's going to be hard for him to win a race, I'd say, with Verstappen and Hamilton performing where they are.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There wasn't that kind of impression that there was that steal from Bottas this weekend. He got pole because he did an okay job in Q3, but everyone did an okay job in Q3. No one did a good job in Q3, and it was. There's not really much to say. You've summed it up pretty nicely there, Nigel. That it's just there wasn't that killer instinct during the race. He put himself in the position to be outplayed in strategy, to out-strategize, out-strategic, as you say, and because he just didn't quite have that pace, and that's just classic Bottas, not quite getting the tyres into the right window, not quite being able to find. He's sort of on the gap of the tyres is like 56 out of 100. Say he was on 57, and Hamilton and Verstappen are on 56, and that's I don't know why I've said 56, but go with it. And he's just that 1% off, and it throws the whole weekend off camber and puts him in third. and that's it. But he did well to get pole. He did well to stay in the fight at the front because Perez got dropped back and wasn't able to be wasn't able to have any impact there. But that's comparing Bottas to the second Red Bull, because that's his position really. Hamilton's able to just push and push and push and just draw to such a level that Bottas wasn't able to. I mean, I was impressed that he was able to stick with Verstappen for so long into the race until he had his sensor change issue that threw him out of the running for second. But I did think he probably could have got second. Now I've said all of that, but so he had good pace, just not at the right points.
Yeah, I think I was about to echo that. I think second was definitely on the cards for him, and yeah, it's just, I think it's felt from the start of the season, since we saw where Red Bull's pace was and where Verstappen was, that it was, not going to be the typical season for Bottas, and he has just, he's been completely second fiddle. He's been, as you say, in the Perez bracket rather than the Hamilton and Verstappen bracket. And it's just, I think it was a big opportunity missed because Mercedes didn't use team orders. It was, completely theirs to race, and Bottas is to make the best fist of it he could. And later in the season, we saw at Sochi 2019 that Mercedes will use team orders if their championship position is in threat, and it's a bigger threat this season, I think, than it was then. So, it was a big opportunity for Bottas, and he just didn't do it. There's not, like you say, Freddie, there's not really much to say on it. It's just, he's just slightly not as good as Hamilton and Verstappen.
I was just going to say, I think it's his best weekend of the year so far. But
yeah,
like I said, it wasn't quite good enough. And I don't think he can be entirely blamed for not getting second, because Mercedes did have a slightly slower pit stop than Red Bull. And that half a second or whatever it was might have cost him precious time. Yes, he slid the tyres and stuff, but yeah, what have you got to add, Freddie?
Just on Adam's team orders point, if you're Bottas, would you rather be in the fight for the win and finish third, or would you rather be second because Mercedes were clinical with their team orders? I think Bottas would rather be third but fight for the win. But I think, it's just that 10 races too early for Mercedes to even consider saying the phrase wingman. But who knows? It's just that if there's a glaring pace differential between Hamilton and Bottas in race 3, then you can do team orders, but it's just that little bit too early. And Bottas at that point was still in second. So it's a hard one, the team orders, that early on debate. I mean, anyone who's paid attention to Ferrari's early 2000s exploits, as I have, will attest to that. But anyway.
Well, Ferrari in 2019 at Melbourne, they swapped Leclerc and Vettel.
No, they didn't. They just said whole position, get your points.
Yeah, sorry, that's it. But
and then Leclerc went wide anyway.
Yeah, but I don't know. You think Red Bull in that position would have swapped the drivers? I think they would personally, because there's that dynamic of Perez brought into the team to be the second driver.
No, yeah, I don't think so.
I don't know. There is that dynamic, but there isn't the pace differential, because if Perez is in that position as well, Perez is doing well. He's doing well enough to be in that position. That's the hard thing. Team orders are really hard to play when you've got a third car on your back. And if there's 4 cars there, if you play team orders, you'll just get overtaken straight away, unless you're able to sort of navigate a 1-2. But if you're able to navigate a 1-2, you keep the 1-2 as best you can. And by making one driver slow down a bit and potentially get overtaken, then it's a really hard one to play. It's a really rare situation, but
I think Horner, he's spent the last 8 years or whatever being so annoyed at Mercedes and being them coming in every we're going to beat them, and then we're second off and it's bad. And I don't know. I think he probably would, to be honest. I think he really pathologically wants to win this with Verstappen.
You would, though. You really would. You put all your effort into this team, and then by some annoying turbo hybrid regulation, you start losing it, and then you try to do other differences, and you lose it more with your own car, and then eventually you get up to a championship fight, and you're like, yes, we're going to have this. And if you lose it, you're just, I don't know how crushing that would be.
For all of chirpy Austrian team principal.
Gerhard Berger. I don't know what you're talking about.
Gerhard Berger wasn't competing this weekend in Portugal. So one who was is Lando Norris, and I think for the third consecutive race, he finished one place ahead of Charles Leclerc, which, that did happen in Imola, didn't it? I think it happened in Bahrain, going off memory. So, yet again, Norris coming out on top in the Ferrari and McLaren battle. I guess it's just a bit more of the same of what he's been doing so far in 2021. Perhaps not quite as impressive, but he's getting the result in the end, it seems.
Well, I think what makes it maybe more impressive is the fact that it's not notable, or it's less notable now. Because, and I thought this kind of putting together my winners and losers piece, that it's not him finishing 5th and Leclerc finishing 6th. Last season, at the start of this season, that would be, a bigger thing. Whereas this is, it's kind of not expected, but it feels like kind of the most likely outcome, or easily within reach for him. And I think that's not to take anything away from this performance. It's just to show how he's elevated himself over the off season, over the start of the season.
Very good point.
So again, it was just a tidy race. I think he got taken by Ocon at the start or on the first lap, and then managed to get back past.
Brilliant
and
move.
It just seemed to be quite quiet, to be honest. He just plugged away and did very well and finished 4 seconds ahead of the Ferrari. And he's just putting together such a quietly good campaign. And it's, again, Ricciardo, I'm sure we'll come on to him later, but he's, there's no doubt who is leading the team at the moment.
It's hard to judge championship positions from the first 3 races in a 23 race series, but he's 3rd by a chunk. He's 37 points in 3rd, and Bottas in 4th is like, 30 odd? He's like, that's enough for Bottas to supersede quite quickly, but it's still a really, well-deserved position in the championship. And he started 7th in every race, and he's gone up in every race. 4th, 3rd, 5th, and that's fantastic. And I think to be honest, there's more to come from Norris, because I think he'd be qualifying 5th or 6th in the future races. I don't think there's steps back for him if he does that. I think in Barcelona and Monaco, if he qualifies 5th or 6th, then he's finishing there. So I don't see any negative future in the next few races, at least for Norris. There were flashes of pace from Ricciardo in practice, and he had a storming race, to be honest, aided by his strategy, but he got through the field pretty well early on as well, on harder tyres. But his qualifying just was beggars belief. I have no idea. He made a lock up into like turn 12, turn 13. But to be honest, compared to the amount of time he did lose to Norris, it was second and 1.1 seconds. But that's minimal. So he just drove a bad lap. He just drove bad qualifying. I think that's the bigger question. Is Norris is doing fantastically. Adam's given a fantastic rundown of how fantastic he's doing with his basically rejuvenated spirit and leading of the team. But I think there's more questions about Ricciardo's ability to adapt.
Are we surprised how far Ricciardo is? Because I think we all expected he would take some races, but are we surprised by the gap?
Completely.
Yes.
I think I've said before, I was kind of worried for Norris. I thought he'd be in a very tough position, and Ricciardo has done this to drivers with much more complete F1 CVs than Norris. And it's just, so far there's kind of been no indication of Ricciardo being able to do that. It's a massive surprise. I know we'll have to wait, more races to see where they stack up, and it's only when we get to the end of the season that we'll be able to properly put a pin in it. But we can only go off what we've seen so far, and what we've seen so far compared to what we've seen from Ricciardo and Norris as teammates previously in other teams or with other partners, then it's a break from that, I think.
Yeah, it's just like I said there. It's just a surprise. I mean, I think Ricciardo, we've seen him change teams and do well. Like, you went from Red Bull to Renault. I don't know how different in characteristics they are, but he struggled at first, but then the way he got on top of that early on in the season, he was I don't know, by Canada or something, it was 6-1 in qualifying to Ricciardo, and by that point he was just soaring ahead of Hulkenberg in 2019. And I kind of expected the same from this year. I expected Ricciardo to sort of come in, wobble a bit in the first few races, but then just to sort of pick away at the way he supersedes Norris. And I don't know, a little bit of me still thinks that can happen, but Norris is just putting in such a campaign that if Ricciardo can get on that level, that's a success for Ricciardo now. And that's so weird to say, considering he was a driver who was fighting for podiums week in, week out last year, was Ricciardo. So I think there's just slightly more things that need to change from Ricciardo. This car has definitely has worked with the way Norris has changed his style. He's said a few times they need to drive it slightly differently this year, but he's clearly got on top of that. Ricciardo is clearly a much bigger change for him to drive with a Mercedes engine, with an entirely new car. I think he's driven a Renault engine his entire career, apart from when he was at Toro Rosso. So it's
I think he said the brakes are a big thing as well.
Oh, the brakes. Okay, that's interesting. Then the brakes are different as well, so we need to deal with that. Yeah, I'm just trying to look at surface things, but yeah, there's probably so much more to it. I think it's just all new. He's got to relearn how to be a Formula One driver.
You have, but other drivers have changed teams as well, and they have shown something. Perhaps they haven't beaten their teammates, but they've showed indications. I think other than Bahrain, where Ricciardo was okay, I'd say, I don't think he hasn't exactly lit up the world, and you've got to start producing at some point. You can't just keep waiting race after race, because if we're having this conversation in a month's time, then I think that's a real problem.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to wait to the end of the season, because if we're having this conversation in a month's time, but then from June or July onwards, then he beats Norris every single race. That's that's fine.
Ricciardo's earned the chance to wait in the past 10 years of his Formula One career. To be fair, he's proven success. He's a Grand Prix winner. He's a 30-odd podium, something like that. He's definitely got the right to have a stay of execution. So, I mean, but if he's still not there at the end of the season, I think there's questions about this contract, to be honest.
I'd agree with that. It doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, he'll take time to get up to speed, but I think it's where he is when he does get up to speed, to me, because we know what he can do. We've seen that in 2 or 3 or 4, I guess if you count HRT, teams, that he is a very good driver, and he was able to displace Vettel from Red Bull, the 4-time reigning world champion Vettel. And yeah, I just think it's not ideal, clearly, and if we're still having this conversation in a month's time, then that will be even less ideal. But
no way.
It's as much as it's balancing how long it takes for him to click with how fast he is when he does click. And if he feels like he's got on top of the car and he's still level pegging or a tenth behind Norris, that will be more of a concern than if he takes 3 months to get on top of the car, but then can be challenging Perez when he does.
I think my problem is that I think it's a genuine lack of pace, whereas other drivers who've changed teams, they've shown something, or they might have made mistakes, which is the reason why they've had a bad result. Whereas Ricciardo hasn't made any major errors. It is just a genuine raw pace issue.
Where does that come from then? Because we know he's not a slow driver.
He's done good jobs relatively, though. He's finishing the points in every race. He has had, I don't know if Norris just hides it so well until qualifying, but he's particularly this weekend, he's shown a lot of relative pace to Norris across practice. Realistically, looking at the weekend with a deep dive, it's qualifying that's let him down, and that was atrocious, is qualifying, the way it's let him down. But looking at the qualifying session later on, it seemed to be, if you get your lap at the right point, it's a great lap. If you get your lap at a slightly different point, it's a woeful lap. So I don't know if he got caught out by that, if you give him a bit of a reprieve, because he did come back in the race and he came back through very quickly. There was only one retirement, but he was still up to 13th or 12th at the restart, basically, and was plugging away, and finished in the points. Finished 9th in the end. So in the background, there is actually relative pace there, to be honest. It's just, I think there's still a slight insecurity there. And I think it probably is just more just getting rid of those slight insecurities. So in the qualifying one session where it's not going well for him, he's half a second off, say not 1.1 seconds off in that session, and then can probably fight in a similar vein later on and probably be 7th or 8th with Norris in a similar position later on. So there are glimmers there. It's not that, I don't think it's that he's lost pace. I think it's that he sometimes is struggling to unlock said pace.
It would, to me, it would just be, that I can't even think of the word. Unprecedented. To lose that, to drop that amount of pace that quickly, when he was comfortably beating Ocon last season, to then being second behind Norris this season. I don't know.
Having seen what's happened with Sebastian Vettel, I am open to a potential situation with Ricciardo happening. I don't think
it was over a longer period of time.
What was that? Sorry?
That was over a longer period of time.
I'd say it kind of happened 18 to 19 when Leclerc replaced Raikkonen, wasn't it?
19 to 20.
Yeah, and that as well. Yeah.
Vettel was fighting for pole in Brazil and USA 2019. He was ahead of Leclerc at the end of the season. It's kind of like Vettel didn't lose his pace. Vettel lost his complete, utter will with Ferrari. When there was a will with Ferrari, he was on the podium in Turkey. It's a hard one to sort of talk about because
we're going off topic here, aren't we?
Yeah, we are going off topic, but we're talking about sort of driver mentality relating to performance. And if there are more awful results like qualifying for Ricciardo, then the mentality will come in. But he's got the mentality issues will come in, and he will start to think about himself in that way. And I'm sure he already is slightly, but there are a lot of ways he can step back and look at it. He's got a team around him that's completely supportive. As Zach Brown, Andreas Seidel, I want them standing behind me, just saying, "Go on, Freddie," for everything, because I think they would do, and they are doing with Daniel and definitely Lando. And they've got such a character in that team that I really think that if there's any team that you can turn around your mojo in, it's McLaren. And he's still got the fallback of disrupted opening season new car and all of that. He's got 3 days of testing in the car. We've only had 3 Grand Prix, so he's had 15 days, 12 days in the car. That's it. Count the filming day, and that's been at such different tracks, such different conditions. Bloody sandstorm. So I don't know if he was involved in that, but anyway, take it to Barcelona. That's a better test.
Yeah, I think he will come on. I do. I think just how long it'll be.
Yeah, I hope he does. I think Adam and I are definitely here, like, really want him to. But why? Come on.
Nigel is here, like, no, I don't want him to. No.
Let's jump on a driver. Ha ha! A new driver to hate. This is the new Alex Albon. Ha ha ha. The manic look in Nigel's eye just comes out. The glint. He's like Snape.
He's struggling next to his teammate. I know I can jump on this.
Let's talk about Alpine, because they are probably the happiest team other than Mercedes coming out of the weekend. They had a really poor event in Imola last time out, but then they really turned things on in Portugal. And Esteban Ocon in particular, I thought he was the star of qualifying to get 6th place, 3rd row of the grid. And yes, Alonso came back at him, but I think Ocon is starting to show the form that he had when he was at Force India in the first 2 seasons of his F1 career.
Yeah, Ocon's a perfect example of when you move teams to a car that you don't quite gel with, how long it takes you to kind of get on board with that car. Not bringing it back to the previous debate, but why not? I think he did a fantastic job.
Yeah,
he was
rubbish,
so good all weekend. That's from a few podcasts ago. Ocon was only like 3,000ths off 5th place. And I mean, we'll get to Sainz's fantastic qualifying later on, I'm sure. But Ocon was then really racy out of the blocks. He was really good through every qualifying session, every practice session. Top notch. I mean, where did he finish in the end? 7th in the points, I think.
A
second ahead of Alonso, with Alonso suddenly coming alive on the hard tyres. I think Ocon did really well considering the tyres he was on, the strategy he was on. I think that's where Ocon shines.
Yeah, agreed. Adam, you got anything on Alpine, Alonso or Ocon?
Yeah, nice for them. I'm happy for them. They got 10 points, which is good. I don't know.
Great analysis there.
It's very good. 10 points is really good considering they got 3 last time out and they didn't get any in Bahrain, and they were lucky to get those points.
I think looking at it from a wider perspective, kind of it shows the fact that they're kind of so happy about this and it's kind of taken as such a good result, maybe shows where they are in terms of their ambitions for this season. And compared to last season, this would probably be a poor result because they'd have dropped points to their midfield rivals. So I guess there's that element, but I don't want to rain on their parade because they did well. Ocon did very well. He's done pretty well since Alonso's joined, and this was kind of the combination of that over the first 3 races. I think it will be a high point. I don't think they'll have many of these weekends this season, but the fact that they were able to get a double points finish after this is, more power to them. And Alonso got a good move done on Ricciardo kind of at around 50 laps, I think, which is something that I don't think many of us expected to see, or certainly I didn't expect to see many Alpine overtaking McLarens this season. So, yeah, happy for them. Go Alpine.
Yeah. I think it's good. I think they've got every right to be happy. I think they've proven to themselves that they can compete this season. I think maybe it's taken 2 races for them to unlock that in the car, but that happened. That was the same last year. You look at their sort of round 4 or 5 form in 2020. It was pretty shoddy, to be honest. You had a few okay performances from Ricciardo, but that was about it. And then they had an unlocking of the setup, and they were flying. And it looks like they've kind of done that again. And if they've maybe 1 or 2 upgrades and it's going in such a good direction to boost them up there with an unlocking of the setup, they know exactly what they're doing with that car now. So I think we will see a lot more of what Adam doesn't expect to see. I think. Yeah. I hope we do. I want them all to do well.
We do.
Nice
even I want them all to do well. Even I want down to 20 drivers to do well.
Nice livery and a nice livery and a nice car kind of bulb on the top, which is quite cute, I think.
It's really fat though, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's just like a big
it's just like, oh my god, it's like an escape pod.
You look at all the other cars and they just like really taper in at the top, and it's just like they're trying to have their engine cover as small as possible, and Alpine is just
Alpine's like, you can get in it if you want. Let's just climb into the top of the engine cover, just have a look. It's great for maintenance. Just go into it.
Looks like it's trying to eat the other car. I don't know. I like it.
So people say like if you see the yellow helmet of Senna in your mirrors, you quake in fear and get out of the way in qualifying. With the Alpine, it's like, oh my god, how do I get out of the way? It's so big. Thank God they're not lapping people.
Out of context, Freddie.
So big.
How do I get out of the way? It's so big.
This feels like a Monty Python sketch.
Welcome to
Nigel, bring it back on course. You're hosting.
Ferrari had an okay weekend, I guess. Leclerc out-qualified. That was surprising, but then he did bounce back on race day. Sainz kind of went backwards and have really much pace on the medium tyres. I think he was on in the second stint. So
yeah, it was a strategy blunder. They went on the medium tyres on like lap 15. You had to last them make them last for about 45 laps. I wouldn't put it all
down on Sainz. I don't think. I think Ferrari.
Yeah, it's not Sainz's fault. But the tyres were going. The soft tyres were going quite early on for a lot of drivers, but they probably could have stuck with them in the way that the top teams did with their medium tyres. But it's just like, they kind of had to pull the trigger to make something happen. Otherwise, they were going to be stuck in about 6th or 7th for so long. And they took a gamble and
it didn't pay off.
Fair enough. They nearly got past Norris. Nearly did. but that was it, to be honest. I don't know. It took away from Sainz's fantastic qualifying performance. Wow, 5th place. Hats off, mate. Great job.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, I don't know. I think like McLaren, it's the fact that for Leclerc 6th is kind of par now is kind of says a lot, really. And Sainz being 5th was a very good qualifying from him. Probably second to Ocon, I'd say, in terms of the best performances of the Saturday. And they did try something and it didn't come off, but I don't think they still got a decent haul of points through Leclerc, and I think it's a lot of improvement from what we saw last year, and it's good that they're getting there, and happy for them, nearly.
It's a hard one to be happy. You're right. Leclerc's keeps saying, yeah, it's hard to be happy about being 5th or 6th when we should be fighting for 1st and that kind of thing. And you're right. Sort of every race is a failure for Ferrari, but you've got to look at the little victories.
Right. Well, let's talk about the pessimism stakes, which is our mini series where we talk about Alfa Romeo, because Adam and Freddie believe we did not talk about them enough last year. We've got a big talking point this weekend because Kimi Raikkonen and Antonio Giovinazzi came together, which put Raikkonen out of the race. I mean, he was looking down at his steering wheel, wasn't he? And he just kind of ran into the back of him, which was a bit silly, I think.
It's definitely a glass half empty situation. It's just I don't know. When I saw it first time, it felt a bit like Giovinazzi maybe moved a tad back to the left, and I think that just caught out Raikkonen. It's his kind of duty to make sure that he leaves enough space to overtake and leaves that margin there. But I don't know. It
not really.
It kind of
It's not his duty to say, "Oh, please overtake."
No, for Raikkonen.
For Raikkonen, yeah, it was Raikkonen's mistake. I don't think Giovinazzi did anything wrong.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He needs to leave
ahead.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He needs to leave some, margin that isn't half a millimeter. But I think Giovinazzi might have moved a tad over to the left, and that was ultimately what sunk Raikkonen. And then the front wing got caught under his car, and he couldn't turn for the first corner, and just kind of trudged to a stop there and brought out the safety car. So, Raikkonen.
Pessimism. It was. I think it was just completely ridiculous. Even if you've got the wrong setting on your steering wheel, if you're that close in combat, it's kind of like it looked so kind of obvious that he was going to hit him. You kind of think at least you would have one eye on, not keep you sort of staring intently at the steering wheel. I mean, this is like someone on the M1 trying to change their song rather than looking at the junction that got to go off. It's
then crashing into the Alfa Romeo in front again, their front wing stuck under their car.
Exactly. It's an amateur mistake that is just, I don't know. Lap one, end of lap one, everyone's tucked in behind everyone, aren't you? You're not gonna. I don't know. Obviously, he made a mistake he changed something on the steering wheel. He'd done it wrong, so he needed to change it again and was checking that. And I appreciate that. And that's a bit of an effort. You've got to press a lot of buttons on these steering wheels, but it's just keep the racing in mind. Come on.
Yeah, it was just silly. I think that's all you can say, really.
So should he get a penalty next week?
Nice throwback to the Imola podcast.
No, because Giovinazzi stayed in the race.
Okay.
Yeah, it impacted Raikkonen. It was lucky it didn't impact Giovinazzi. To be fair, because that could have completely torn apart his tyre and spun him on the pit straight and caused a big accident, a big accident. And also, everyone's lucky that Raikkonen was able to kind of brake a little bit. He couldn't brake much, he couldn't steer, but he could brake a bit. But you get your front wing stuck underneath the wheels, and you just go, you're a passenger. That happened to Alonso in Malaysia 2012, I want to say, or 13, Malaysia 13. His wing just came off, boom, straight off. And it's scary. It was scary. I kind of thought he was going to collect someone, to be honest, and then he just beached it in the gravel. And then the marshals took about 50 weeks to get him off the track. But
I just
anyway.
realised why Adam has asked that question, and I think it might come back to haunt me. But let's move on. AlphaTauri fell back a little bit.
Only just realised.
But he said it.
I said it. Well, I said throwback to the Imola podcast immediately.
Yeah, I know, but I just realised the answer I gave. And yeah. Anyway, AlphaTauri fell back a little bit compared to the first two races. Aston Martin still haven't shown anything yet. Russell got into Q3. Have either of you got any thoughts on either of those teams?
Nice move from Gasly at the end to get a point. Again, it's that AlphaTauri that they're not, even when they're doing well, they've not been able to get double points finishes, and that's continuing so far. Tsunoda's, after he performed so well in Bahrain, he's not quite hit that level again yet, and I think it's maybe showing AlphaTauri, yes, they're good, but they're not, they're not going to be fighting at the front of the midfield week in, week out. They are they're just a half step below the Ferrari and McLaren, and that's fine.
I think they missed the chances in the first two races. And I think I said that
I'd agree.
Each race. And they've really missed the chance to score, say, double-figure points for both cars. And now the back where they are, they missed the boat.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there will be a few races where they do pop up again. I think there'll probably be some characteristics to this track that have completely thrown them a bit. We had that with a few cars in the race that were just so slow. Look at George Russell, and just cars that couldn't compete in the race. And I think AlphaTauri was still actually okay in regards to that, but you could tell this track had a much more of an impact, or at least the conditions around the track, the wind and stuff like that, and the slippery conditions have much more of an impact on their car than the grippier tracks and the more kind of steady tracks that we've had previously. So I think there will be time to shine for AlphaTauri again this year, but I don't know. You're right. It kind of, it'll make you sit up a bit more if you're working there.
Yeah, and Williams and Haas, Mick Schumacher in particular, had a very good weekend. Yeah, qualified Mazepin again. I guess that's kind of expected, but his race pace was very good. He kept up with Latifi, and if Latifi wasn't there, he could have done even better, I think. So I think Schumacher is definitely, I don't know whether the track suited him, whether he's getting used to the car, maybe a bit of both. But I was quite impressed by his performance at the weekend. What did you two make of it?
He spent a lot of time tracking Latifi in the second stint before he finally made his move. I thought it was really strong overall, to be honest, even from practice. And then going through, it's with Schumacher, he's managed to keep a low profile despite being the most touted driver to come into the sport possibly ever, which is kind of, I guess, partly testament to him just keeping his head down and being able to focus on the job in hand, and also the Haas's atrocious pace. It's not always the easiest, and we've seen this with Williams and Russell over the last few years. It's not always easy to kind of evaluate drivers when they're just kind of in that basement battle, driving around lap after lap. But from what we did see, he was very good, and just I was so impressed by the way he stayed with Latifi and then finally made his move.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same with that. Like, it was really impressive the way he was able to stick with Latifi all while being lapped, and then get back to being within a second of him. And then the gap would go up because of the lapping. Then he'd get back to being within a second of him. And he was able to stick within a second of him for so long. And it was, honestly, that's really good. I mean, Latifi's probably had issues with his tyres, which enabled that to be possible. But Mick Schumacher didn't let that stop him and just pressured Latifi into a mistake. And Latifi locked up, went wide at turn 3. And Schumacher just was like, all right, and went straight through. Didn't make a mistake. He didn't make a crucial mistake and got past and drove away from Latifi. I wasn't keeping an eye on his pace relative to Russell. I don't know if he was closing on Russell, but he did really good job. Really knows what he's doing. He's clearly picked a lot up in the first two races because this was a much better performance. And he just grew and grew over the first few races. I expect Haas are going to be very, very happy to split the two Williams cars.
Schumacher's driving style, I don't think I've ever talked about this. Even throughout his F2 career, he turns in quite early, the front tyres, it will generate more heat, which is why Sochi and Monza last year in F2 won there, because those tracks are quite low deg. So I think that kind of helped in Portimão, because it's a pretty low degradation track, and you want to generate the tyre temperature, which everyone was struggling with. So I think his driving style helped him at the weekend to generate the heat in the front tyres, and I think it paid off. So it wouldn't surprise me to see him if he repeats it again at tracks which aren't that hard on the tyres.
Not a great style for next week though in Barcelona.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very high deg track. Very much is going to not favour that high energy style. But anyway.
Yeah, that's why he was kind of like on and off in the F2 season. I think he wasn't. He was consistent, but he was never at his best consistently, I'd say. But yeah, it was great.
Right, he never qualified on the front row in the F2 season.
Oh yeah, good point now. Yeah. Was there any
Mark
other
of a good racer?
But now let's talk about the track actually, because Max Verstappen was very vocal about it. He said he doesn't want to come back to Portimão. He said he did not enjoy one single lap in the whole weekend. Is that something you two agree with? Well, obviously you didn't drive, but is it in his fault?
I didn't drive. I did my fair bit.
I think I was in the minority last year that didn't really rate the Portuguese Grand Prix, and I think this is, I don't know,
vindication or not?
No, because I want to see, I want it to be a good track. I want there to be more good tracks that F1 goes to. But it just doesn't seem to offer, I think, that much different from what we've already got. And I think this was a massive opportunity for it. And we saw, I think the race at Imola kind of really changed the perception of that track, because there was such an exciting race after quite a boring one last year. And that will be what a lot of people remember now from Imola. For a new generation of fans, they'll remember that race, even if it's not on the calendar again, or on the calendar again for another 15 years. And Portimão, I don't know. I don't think either race has been that memorable. I'd be surprised if we head back there. And yeah, but it's not the worst track on the calendar.
I think the opposite. I think it is very different to other tracks due to the track surface. I love the roller coaster, type thing it has. Well, words, there you go. Well, yeah, I think the low grip. I think that is different to what we normally see. Yes, the drivers are complaining, but they always want more grip. They always want more power. So I think it's something different. Yes, it doesn't suit everyone's taste, but the calendar needs variety. I think Portugal
needs some boring races and some exciting races.
Well, the track wasn't why it was a boring race. It's Mercedes were able. I mean, it kind of comes down to the track of it. The Mercedes were able to work a bit better on the low grip conditions, and if Red Bull were able to fight with them some more on the low grip conditions, then it would be, it'd be a fantastic race. That kind of thing. It's if it was wet, it'd be a fantastic race. Like look at Turkey last year. Turkey had this low grip phenomenon to such a degree that no one could drive a lap around it without sort of nearly spinning off. And that was saved, to be honest, by the fact that it rained. If it didn't rain, I mean, Turkey would have been an embarrassment last year. So who knows what it's going to be like in June this year. But anyway, like the track, was resurfaced and not rubbered in before last year, and not rubbered in since. Really, he's had a couple of MotoGP rounds, but they've been too late in the year to make much of an impact in terms of grip. You needed to have like a really sort of hot summer to get the tarmac to sort of, the asphalt to sort of like ooze around a bit and settle. So it's still pristine on top. And like, I kind of think if it was a bit more of a sort of aggressive surface, it would be all right, to be honest. I think it'd be good fun.
Yeah, I thought the race was quite good. I thought it was a great race yesterday, because it's not often you see top three running within 2 seconds. It's not.
Yeah, it was really good. The start of the race was fantastic.
Go wheel to wheel twice. Yes, we've been very lucky to see it 3 races in a row. But if you think about the last 4 or 5 years, it hasn't happened that much. It's happened a bit, but not.
Is that because of where the teams are at rather than the track?
Yeah,
if it's happened 3 times this season,
because not every track on the safety car restart can you attack like you can, and not every track can you swoop round the outside at turn one, and I quite like that.
There were lots of lines that gave the ability for cars within the mid part of the circuit to keep close as they wiggled through the track. They were able to take different lines, so they had different levels of dirty air, so they were able to go faster and keep close, and that's why you had the top three running of Bottas, Verstappen, Hamilton, or in any order really, but mostly that order. You're able to have them going close with each other and not having to back off, not cooking their tires for a good 20 laps, which is ridiculous. Like normally you have like 3 laps of attack. We saw this in Bahrain. Verstappen had a few laps of attack and then couldn't get past again, couldn't get anywhere near to get past again because of his tires, even dropping out of DRS and all of that. Like they had the ability at this track to do different things and to go crazy. It's like the best bits of Kota, but through the middle of the track.
Yeah, and you can overtake and you can race. We saw that last year as well. Yes, DRS might be a little bit too powerful, but I think that's just more a DRS thing rather than the track. And I do like the fast overtake round turn one because it is something different. There's not many corners or not many places on the calendar where we see drivers do that. So I think it offers something different with the low grip, with the kind of racing it creates, I think.
I'd rather it be higher grip. I kind of think if there was high grip, like the qualifying could have been something like the Imola qualifying where the cars can just push and push and push. Like there wasn't that level of supreme driver attack in qualifying that you could get, and I think there could be more of that. If the track was a bit grippier,
which is what I like to see.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I appreciate that. I kind of think for me, I want it to be a bit more like just when you want to push the car, you can really push the car. And the way they were pushing the car in Sunday's race was in an entirely different way, and it left them exhausted afterwards. Hamilton was shattered, but it's like, yeah, I thought the race was all right. I would like to go back there. I mean, it's a bit annoying to hear everyone complain about it, and that kind of thing, like with Verstappen going like, oh, I don't want to come back. It's like, it's a good article, but it's a bit like, all right, well, win.
Yeah, I think there are probably 5 tracks just off the top of my head that I'd rather see on the calendar, but yeah.
We go where we go. We go where we go with a terrible formula for racing, and we can't really say too much about there being bad racing, I think, when you look at the cars.
I don't know. I think
you can say it. I think you can say it about the cars a lot more than you can say about the tracks.
I think this season it's been good though.
I mean, they've been able to like be close to each other on pace, but to race has been like, it's been not fantastic.
They've been able to race. I think, personally, you see, it's not necessarily an overtaking fest every weekend, but you are seeing teams being able to race. You're seeing good rivalries developing up and down the grid, I think, and you've had good racing at the front. There's been moves to the lead on in every race so far, which is what we want to see.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think there'll be more of that with a better car. That's why we're angling for 2022, but who knows?
Let's do 20 seconds on Callum Ilott. I've just remembered he did take part in the weekend. He did better than I thought, I'll say that.
Did all right. FP1 Performance Classic. He's doing another one in France. That's what he should probably evaluate when he's had a few more chances.
Yeah, good. Nice to see. Again, hope he does well in France, but it's good he didn't bin it and he seemed decently close to Raikkonen.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that wraps up the podcast for today. We will be back, hopefully, before Spain for a quick episode there. My thanks to Freddie, my thanks to Adam. You can find us on Twitter, Winging It F1, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Acast, pretty much anywhere if you want to listen and watch us. So until next time, we'll say goodbye.
Bye.